You know that specific kind of anxiety that just settles in your chest sometimes? That feeling of being totally adrift, like the map you're holding is constantly shifting right beneath your feet. It's honestly terrifying, right? The fear of just becoming this random collection of contradictory impulses, instead of having one unified direction in life. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating text that tackles this exact anxiety head-on. It's titled The Divine Compass, Navigating Life Through God Orientation.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to really think deeply for a second. What is the actual compass in your life? Because when you look around, we're constantly surrounded by these competing magnetic fields, pulling us in a dozen different directions every single day. So what's actually guiding your decisions? The source text really pushes us to confront what the true north of our daily lives actually is.
The thing is, the text points out that we constantly rely on false compasses. Is it money? Maybe it's the endless pursuit of respect or recognition from your peers. Or, that exhausting treadmill of trying to keep everybody else happy. Or maybe it's just our own selfish desires. The author makes it super clear. These false compasses absolutely fail to give you a unified direction. Relying on them, it just leaves you with a chaotic, confusing collection of contradictory impulses.
Which brings us to Section 1, Religion Before the Brands.
To really get this, the text asks us to look at religion before it became all these modern competing brands. Instead of divided institutions, it lays out this incredible historical lineage, a shared blueprint for living. We're talking about a continuity stretching all the way from Noah to Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. And look, obviously they didn't all share the same rituals or even speak the same languages, but the text argues something profound. They shared the exact same orientation toward God. It wasn't about making up paths as they went along. It was a very deliberate, ordained trajectory.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast with how we view religion today. We treat it like divided, competing labels, almost like brand loyalty, honestly. But in this analysis, religion was originally defined as a unified, steadfast orientation. The external rituals aren't the thing that unifies us, the compass itself is.
That shifts us into Section 2, the modern polytheist.
Now this brings the focus right back to our modern behavior through what the author calls the goodness bias. Basically, this is our habit of making up our own rules about who's saved and who's condemned. We kind of trick ourselves into thinking that because we use the right labels or memorize the right texts, we've got the whole universe figured out. But the source argues strongly that God's definitions are the only ones that actually matter. Think about it. Someone society praises as super holy might not hold a high position in the eyes of the divine at all. Meanwhile, a completely unnoticed person who is genuinely striving and turning toward God, they might be right on track. The author even humorously throws out this idea that someone living on Mars, or literally an alien, who turns their internal compass to God has a valid chance. Because at the end of the day, it's about the internal orientation, not the external doctrine.
So here is where the text completely redefines polytheism, and it's a real paradigm shift. Forget the ancient imagery of bowing down to physical statues. The text defines polytheism neutrally here. It's simply making material self-interest the master program of your entire operation. It's when we treat our jobs, our bank accounts, or our tech as the absolute primary organizing principles of our lives. When those things take priority over our divine orientation, the text suggests we're fundamentally misaligned. It's like trying to run a complex, high-performance machine with totally the wrong fuel.
And the source drops a deeply surprising observation here. We often end up worshiping our own identity. We literally worship the religious identity itself instead of the divine. The author points out something wild. If you do a quick internet search, you'll actually find way more articles focusing on the label of Muslims than on the actual concept of God. We've taken spirituality and turned it into what the text brilliantly describes as a confusing dish of competing priorities, like tossing chicken, beef, and mutton biryani all onto one super messy plate.
Let's move on to Section 3, the mechanics of choice.
Okay, so this brings us to a really heavy theological friction point, divine preordination versus human agency. The text highlights this super provocative quote, God chooses for himself whoever he pleases and guides towards himself those who turn to him. And the author wrestles pretty honestly with this. I mean, if this absolute ordination acts as some sort of cosmic matchmaking service, doesn't that just lead to intellectual complacency? If the ultimate guide is already choosing the path, what happens to the daily grind when we feel totally lost in the woods? Does it just absolve us of all responsibility?
Well, the text presents a really sharp contrast as the answer.
The real danger here is becoming a passive recipient. Someone who just sits back like a passenger on a predetermined train track, waiting for some grand divine signal to flash in the sky. It's essentially outsourcing your own moral architecture. The text argues fiercely against that kind of surrender. Instead, we have to be active participants. We have to be the engineers of our own journey, actively cultivating our internal awareness and wrestling with those messy, daily choices to keep ourselves aligned with that divine compass.
Let's move to Section 4, the physics of the knot, and see how this builds.
To really grasp how the divine framework and our human actions interact, the text gives us this incredibly powerful tactile metaphor. Imagine your life as an intricate knot. The text breaks this down into 4 specific layers. Step 1 is the thread. This is the raw material of existence itself. Step 2 is the pattern, the established historical structure, that ordained track we talked about earlier. Step 3 is the tension. This is the active force, the actual pressure that keeps the whole knot from unraveling. And finally, step 4 is the weaver. If the divine force provides the pattern, you are the weaver. Your job isn't just to blindly follow the pattern. Your job is to understand the physics of the knot and intentionally apply the necessary pressure to make sure the thread holds together.
And that brings us to Section 5, applying the right tension.
So how do we actually weave this in our day-to-day lives? A massive realization in the text is this. The striving isn't noise. It's the navigation. That messy, agonizing process of moral choice. Waking up every day and choosing the difficult long-term alignment over some cheap, short-term gain. That isn't a distraction from the path. It is the path. That friction you feel, that is exactly what gives our lives meaning and keeps the compass pointing true.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we measure that internal navigation. The author poses a wonderfully practical question. Are we getting closer to God as we age? The text suggests that every single action, whether it's deeply religious or just completely ordinary, needs to be a measurable step on this path. We have to continually check our tension. Are we pulling the thread closer to the compass, or are we just sort of drifting further away as the years go by?
I really want to emphasize this final, powerful realization from the text. The divine framework isn't the destination. It's the physics of the material itself. That's huge. The map isn't some fixed line drawn on parchment that we just passively glide along. The map is the conscious, moment-by-moment tension that we actively apply to the knot of life. It's about recognizing all those subtle shifts in our material reality and continually choosing alignment over and over again.
We end on a critical question from the source. What happens when the tension is misapplied? If we tighten the knot too much, we suffocate the thread. But if we loosen it too much, the whole thing unravels into total chaos. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you contemplating how you apply tension to your own life. Navigating with the divine compass isn't about some blind surrender. It's an exhilarating, honestly terrifying responsibility. It is the active daily choice to keep your existence from simply dissolving into the noise. Thanks so much for diving into this fascinating material with me today.